My daughter-in-law called my life a failure. She said 20 years of sacrifice to raise my son was wasted talent. She thought I was just an old woman stirring dinner. But when I walked into that courthouse and sat down next to Adam, she realized she hadn't just filed a divorce. She'd activated a lawyer who never lost. Watch how I quietly destroyed her greed. The kitchen was Eleanor Vance's sanctuary, a testament to 2 decades spent creating a perfect home in the affluent suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. She wore a simple charcoal turtleneck, her silver hair coiled into a neat, firm knot. She was stirring a pot of mushroom risotto, the delicate aroma of white wine and herbs filling the air, a final offering of warmth before the cold truth set in. She knew the air was toxic long before the front door slammed open. Her son, Adam Vance, shuffled in, his shoulders slumped, carrying the weight of a world that had suddenly rejected his quiet integrity. He placed a thick legal-sized envelope on the granite countertop, the crisp, heavy paper a silent declaration of war. Adam looked at his mother, his eyes bloodshot. "It's done, Mom," Skylar filed. "She wants everything." Eleanor didn't touch the envelope. She simply poured him a glass of iced tea, her hands steady, betraying none of the earthquake rumbling beneath her calm facade. "Everything, Adam? Including the house you bought before you married her?" she asked, her voice low and even. Adam nodded miserably. Her lawyer, Brenda Hayes, is arguing that because we lived here for 8 years, and Skylar contributed to the marriage, it's all marital property. They want to force a sale and split the equity. She's demanding a payout for the rise in value. He braced his hands on the counter, the exhaustion of the past 6 months, since Skylar's attitude shifted, finally crushing him. She said she needs the capital to start a real life, away from my mediocrity. Eleanor's lips tightened. She'd spent 25 years ensuring Adam was anything but mediocre. She had been his rock when his father walked out, sacrificing her own dizzying career track for his stability. The attack on the sacrifice. Just then, Skylar Reynolds drifted into the kitchen, wrapped in a silk robe the color of money. She ignored Adam, who flinched at her presence, and focused her predatory gaze entirely on Eleanor. Well. Domestic goddess at work? Skylar purred, pulling a bottle of imported spring water from the sub-zero fridge. She didn't look at the risotto. Honestly, Eleanor, this quaint routine, it's why Adam is where he is. He learned to settle for comfort food and comfort life instead of ambition. Skylar picked up the divorce envelope, tapping it sharply against the glass. Let me be clear, Eleanor. This house is mine too. Legally, I am owed. 8 years of putting up with this lifestyle entitles me to half of its appreciation. Eleanor turned from the stove, her posture perfectly erect. The property was purchased using funds Adam acquired before your marriage, Skylar. That makes it separate property under North Carolina equitable distribution law. Skylar threw back her head and laughed, a high, mocking sound that rattled the crystal glasses. "Oh, bless your heart, Eleanor," Skylar said, oozing contempt. "You think watching Judge Judy makes you an expert? That's sweet. Your entire life has been a waste of talent. You had a Harvard Law acceptance, didn't you? A partnership track at Fletcher & Stone waiting for you. And for what? To exchange a 6-figure salary and prestige for this, a spatula and an apron. You gave up your power to raise a son who made a 5-figure blunder on an investment deal last year. You call that sacrifice? I call that a colossal failure of judgment." The word failure hung in the air, not just attacking Eleanor's choice, but invalidating the very foundation of her identity as a devoted mother. The blood rushed from Eleanor's face, not in shame, but in cold, searing rage. Adam finally found his voice. "Skylar, that is enough. Don't talk to my mother like that." Skylar merely shrugged. "Why? She's just an old woman who gave up. Now she can watch me succeed where she failed. Tell your lawyer, Adam, that if he tries to fight on the separate property clause, I will file the papers on that SEC oversight he made. It's small, but it's enough to ensure he loses his trading license. Tell him to settle, or I'll ruin the legacy his sacrifices built." She dropped the envelope back on the counter and sauntered out, leaving the rich scent of her expensive perfume lingering like a final insult. The awakening. Adam sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. She's right, Mom. If she goes after my license, I lose everything. I have to settle. Eleanor walked slowly to the counter. She didn't look at Adam. She looked at the divorce petition, at the name of the aggressive firm handling the case, and at the smug confidence of Skylar's signature. She picked up the envelope, but instead of handing it to Adam, she walked past him toward the back hallway. She called my choice a failure, Eleanor muttered, her voice now dangerously low, a deep resonance that hadn't been heard in decades. She thinks that years of mothering wiped the slate clean. She thinks I forgot what a legal battlefield smells like. Eleanor stopped at the entrance to the dusty, seldom used attic. You need to see your lawyer. Adam, she said, finally turning to him, her eyes blazing with an intensity that shocked her son. But you won't be settling. Not on my watch. Your wife wants a war fought on legal principles? Fine. She's about to face an adversary she didn't know existed. Adam watched, bewildered, as his quiet mother scaled the narrow steps. Upstairs, the heavy attic door creaked open. The scent of pine and mothballs was immediate. Eleanor crossed the room, ignoring the holiday decorations and forgotten baby toys, heading straight for an enormous, iron-bound trunk tucked under the eaves. This was the trunk she had paid movers a fortune to bring with her from Chicago to North Carolina, the one she had never unpacked. She found the hidden key taped to the underside. With a steady, decisive clack, 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 the 3 locks opened. Eleanor slowly lifted the lid. The light filtering through the small attic window illuminated the contents. A perfectly preserved bespoke charcoal gray power suit, a pair of sensible battle-ready leather heels, and lying beneath them, framed and sealed, a Harvard Law School jurist, Dr. Diploma. She picked up the brass pin, the scales of justice, the one she was supposed to wear on the day she was named partner at Fletcher & Stone, the one she exchanged for a full-time life with Adam. Failure? Eleanor whispered, pressing the cool metal against her palm. No, Skylar, legacy, and you just stepped on it. The attic's single bare bulb cast a weak yellow glow over the relics of a forsaken life. Eleanor Vance knelt before the open trunk, the dust motes dancing in the light. This chest wasn't just old storage. It was a time capsule holding the identity of a woman named Eleanor Hayes, a name that once commanded respect in the legal corridors of New York. She ran a gloved hand over the pristine Harvard Law School JD diploma. 27 years. It felt like a lifetime since she had traded in the meticulous, high-stakes game of corporate law for carpool lanes and PTA meetings. She had made her choice willingly, fiercely, ensuring Adam had the stable childhood she never did. But Skylar's sneer, the word failure, had reopened an old wound and revealed a terrible, immediate need for the weapon she had buried. She carefully lifted the frame, placing it on the floor. Beneath lay a stack of documents, each one a sharp, forgotten tool, a faded, embossed business card, Eleanor Hayes, Associate Counsel, Fletcher & Stone. A personal letter on heavy stationery, an offer from a federal judge for a high-profile clerkship, an offer she politely declined for Adam's sake. A bound, leather volume. Her private notes from the Uniform Marital Property Act seminars, the specific, obscure details of property law that Skylar's generic, aggressive lawyer, Brenda Hayes, would never bother to study. Eleanor retrieved her old phone, a bulky, non-smartphone model kept charged in a drawer, just in case. She found the number she hadn't dialed in a decade, a direct private line. On the 3rd ring, a deep, measured voice answered, Harrison. Stephen, it's Eleanor. Eleanor Vance, she stated, her voice losing the soft edges of a mother and hardening into the timbre of a lawyer. Silence. Heavy, profound silence. Judge Stephen Harrison, a man who now sat on the high court, a man whose judgment could shake cities, was stunned. Eleanor? Good God. I thought you'd dropped off the face of the earth after you left the firm. Is everything all right? Is this about Adam? Stephen asked, concern threading through his professional formality. Adam is fine, Stephen. His wife, Skylar Reynolds, is not, Eleanor said, going straight to the core issue. She's initiating a hostile divorce, attempting to classify his premarital home as marital property, and leveraging a minor, 3-year-old oversight to threaten his financial licensing. Brenda Hayes is handling the filing, Eleanor added, anticipating his next question. Stephen whistled softly. Brenda? She's known for being a shark. Why are you calling me, Eleanor? You know I can't intervene. Judicial ethics. I know the ethics better than anyone, Stephen. I'm not asking you to intervene. I'm asking you to prepare, Eleanor corrected, a flash of her old self-assurance returning. I need the case assigned to a courtroom that will respect the nuances of separate property law, not one that rubber stamps a 50-50 split. More importantly, I need a quiet, private file opened. I need access to Fletcher & Stone's old firm library. I need to know exactly how Brenda Hayes handles her settlement negotiations. We worked the same circuit, Stephen. You know how I prepare. Stephen Harrison paused again, contemplating the sheer audacity of the request. He knew Eleanor's mind. It was a steel trap, meticulous and 3 steps ahead of anyone else in the room. What exactly is your role here, Eleanor? He pressed. Adam has a lawyer, right? Adam has a lawyer who is preparing to settle out of fear, Eleanor said, pulling out the charcoal suit. She held it up. It was still perfect. I, on the other hand, am preparing to argue a technicality that will redefine their case. My role, Stephen, is to defend my legacy. I am Adam's mother, and I am his counsel of record. Stephen Harrison leaned back in his leather chair miles away in the city. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. The great Eleanor Hayes back in the courtroom. It's been too long. Consider the groundwork laid, counselor, but you walk in there as Eleanor Vance, remember? No one knows the name Hayes survived. Of course, Eleanor confirmed. This isn't about fanfare, Stephen. This is about quietly reclaiming what is ours. As she ended the call, she looked down at the documents. Skylar and Brenda Hayes were expecting a passive suburban surrender, a simple division of assets based on greed and intimidation. They were about to face a meticulously prepared, decades-dormant legal mind who had a personal score to settle. Eleanor changed out of her comfortable turtleneck and slipped into the tailored suit. It fit perfectly, the shoulders strong, the fabric smooth. When she clipped the scales of justice pin onto her lapel, she wasn't just dressing up. She was putting on a suit of armor, ready to step back onto the battlefield she had once ruled. She looked into the small, dusty mirror. The quiet, gentle mother was gone. In her place stood Counselor Vance, ready for the next move, the courtroom. The pieces are now in motion. Eleanor has resurrected her legal persona, and Judge Harrison is discreetly clearing the path. The air in the Mecklenburg County Courthouse was thick with old wood, faint disinfectant, and the crushing weight of human sorrow. Eleanor Vance stood in the marble hallway, the crisp charcoal suit feeling like a second skin after 2 decades. The scales of justice pin on her lapel was the only piece of jewelry she wore. Her son, Adam, leaned heavily on the courtroom wall, his face pale with anxiety. He was dressed in his best suit, but his posture was defeated. Mom, I don't know about this, Adam whispered, his eyes darting to the courtroom door. They're going to tear us apart in there. Brenda Hayes is a monster. And why are you walking in with me? Who is going to look after you when she starts questioning you? Eleanor gently placed a hand on his shoulder, a simple grounding touch. I've been looking after myself, Adam, since long before you needed me to. But who is the lawyer? Adam pleaded. Where is he? We're going to be late. Eleanor looked at the courtroom door, courtroom 5B, the one Judge Harrison had quietly confirmed. The lawyer is already here, son. Just follow my lead, and trust the one person in this battle who loves you more than any financial stake. The courtroom froze. They walked in. The room was immediately dense with murmuring and hushed anticipation. Skylar Reynolds was already seated at the plaintiff's table. She wore a tailored cream suit, her hair perfectly styled, radiating an icy confidence. She was flanked by her lawyer, Brenda Hayes, a woman with sharp features and an even sharper reputation. Brenda, armed with a towering stack of binders, looked ready to eviscerate Adam. As Adam shuffled toward the defense table, leaning slightly on the wall for support, Skylar leaned into Brenda's ear and smirked. It was the same look of cold dismissal Eleanor had seen in the kitchen. Then, Brenda Hayes looked up. She glanced at Adam, and then fixed her gaze on the woman walking quietly in his wake. Brenda Hayes's confident smile instantly dissolved. Her eyes narrowed in professional suspicion, trying to place the perfectly poised woman in the powerful suit. Eleanor walked slowly, deliberately, her every step conveying authority. She did not look at Skylar. She did not look at Brenda Hayes. Her focus was absolute. She placed her old leather briefcase on the defense table. The thud was firm, resonating like a declaration. She pulled out the chair next to Adam and sat down, immediately taking charge of the small space. Adam, confused, started to object. "Mom, you can't." Eleanor simply placed her hand over his trembling one, a silent command to be still. The judge's disbelief. The noise in courtroom. IB died instantly as the bailiff's voice boomed, "All rise!" The Honorable Judge Stephen Harrison presiding. The entire room stood. Judge Harrison, a man of massive legal authority and unshakable calm, entered. He settled into the main seat, his gaze sweeping over the plaintiffs, the defense table, and the gallery. His professional demeanor was absolute, his focus sharp. When his eyes landed on Adam, the expression remained neutral. But then his gaze moved 2 feet to the right and fixed hard on Eleanor Vance. The judge froze. His usual stern gravity vanished. His eyes widened, a flicker of pure shock passing over his features. It was the look of a man seeing a ghost from a past life he thought was sealed forever. Skylar and Brenda Hayes glanced nervously at each other, confused by the judge's sudden, prolonged pause. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Judge Harrison leaned forward slightly, his lips barely moving. His voice, usually a commanding roar, was barely audible, yet everyone in the silent room heard the question. He directed it only at Eleanor. "Eleanor, why are you here?" The question was a cold blast in the courtroom. Skylar frowned, looking at Eleanor with raw suspicion. Brenda Hayes was utterly bewildered, scanning her case notes, trying to recall if this woman was a scheduled witness. Adam just looked confused, but a fragile spark of hope ignited in his eyes. Eleanor met the judge's gaze. It was a silent conversation between two people who shared a deep professional history. She did not answer aloud. Instead, she performed a single, deliberate action. She reached for the top of her briefcase, unsnapped the twin locks, and pulled out a single, pristine white card. She placed it squarely on the table for the court clerk to see. The card simply stated, "Eleanor Vance, Counsel for Defense." Brenda Hayes sputtered, finally finding her voice. "Your Honor, I object." "Who is this woman?" "She is not listed as counsel of record." Judge Harrison looked down at the table, a slow smile finally spreading across his face. A genuine smile that hadn't been seen in his courtroom in years. Objection overruled. "Ms. Hayes," Judge Harrison stated, his voice now firm and clear. He addressed the court. "Ms. Vance is well within her rights to enter appearance at this time. She is recognized by this court." He then looked directly at Skylar, whose face was turning a sickly shade of white. "Now, let's proceed," Judge Harrison concluded, picking up the file. "Ms. Hayes, you may present the motion for immediate asset liquidation on behalf of your client. Ms. Reynolds, Counselor Vance, please prepare your response." The battle had just begun, and the ruthless Brenda Hayes had just realized she was not facing an amateur. She was facing a highly skilled professional with a powerful personal vendetta. The tension is now maxed out. Eleanor is officially in the fight. The courtroom air was heavy, but the initial shock had given way to aggressive friction. Brenda Hayes, Skylar's high-powered attorney, was already on her feet, recovering swiftly from the shock of Eleanor Vance's sudden appearance. "Your Honor, with all due respect to Counselor Vance's unexpected debut," Brenda began, her tone laced with professional disdain, "we move to dismiss any argument that the residence at 345 Oak Street is fully separate property. My client, Skylar Reynolds, contributed substantially over 8 years of marriage. She sacrificed potential income and time to maintain the home. We demand a prompt sale and equitable division of the appreciation. Brenda slammed a thick binder onto the podium. We further submit that Mr. Vance's recent financial misstep, the minor but documented SEC oversight, renders him unreliable for managing these high-value assets. We believe a settlement, forced by the court, is the only way to protect my client's future. Schuyler, sitting rigidly at the plaintiff's table, shot a triumphant, contemptuous look at Adam. She expected Eleanor to stand and offer a rambling, emotional defense about love and sacrifice. Instead, Eleanor rose, her posture impeccable. She didn't rush. She simply adjusted her charcoal suit jacket and fixed Brenda Hayes with a look that had once made senior partners sweat. "May it please the court," Eleanor began, her voice steady and controlled. "The defense acknowledges the plaintiff's contribution to the marriage, but disputes its relevance to the separate property clause protecting this residence." She then dropped her first, quiet bombshell. Counselor Hayes relies on contribution to maintenance. However, Exhibit A, a single document I am now introducing, demonstrates that the funds for all major capital improvements, including the 2020 kitchen renovation and the 2022 landscaping, were drawn entirely from an investment account established by my client, Adam Vance, 2 years prior to the marriage. This account was never commingled with joint funds. Brenda Hayes blanched. This detail, the source of the renovation funds, was technical, yet crucial. Her team had only looked at the dates of the renovations, not the origin of the money. "Objection. Hearsay, Your Honor," Brenda snapped. "The exhibit speaks for itself, Counselor Hayes," Judge Harrison stated, leaning over to review the document the clerk had handed him. "The bank records show the clear trail of separate property funds being used." Objection overruled. The cross-examination, Eleanor stepped toward the podium, her eyes never leaving Schuyler's attorney. Counselor Hayes also introduced the threat of exposing my client's minor SEC oversight, a threat intended to coerce a settlement. The defense would like to call Ms. Schuyler Reynolds to the stand. Schuyler shot up, a look of fury mixed with arrogance on her face. She was ready to paint Adam as a financial liability. "Ms. Reynolds," Eleanor began, her voice deceptively gentle. "You claim you sacrificed potential income during the marriage to support the home, correct?" "Absolutely," Schuyler declared confidently. "I put my career on hold to focus on the home and support Adam's work. Yet, I submit to the court, Exhibit B." Eleanor laid a simple white piece of paper on the clerk's desk. "This is a subpoena for financial records for the plaintiff, Ms. Schuyler Reynolds, specifically for an account at the City National Bank, account number 987002, opened in 2021. Schuyler's composure shattered. Her eyes darted wildly, first to her attorney, then back to Eleanor. Brenda Hayes grabbed her client's arm, panic flashing across her face. "Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant. It violates her privacy," Brenda shouted. "Not if this account relates to marital assets, Counselor Hayes," Judge Harrison responded, his gaze now stern. He looked at Eleanor. "Counselor Vance Foundation?" Eleanor didn't look at the subpoena. She looked directly at Schuyler, who was now trembling. "Your Honor, the defense asserts that the funds in this account, totaling over $480,000, were derived from a lucrative, undisclosed freelance consulting career that Ms. Reynolds conducted remotely over the last 5 years of the marriage," Eleanor explained, her voice gaining power. "This income acquired during the marriage was never disclosed to my client, Adam Vance, nor was it ever used for the supposed maintenance of the marital home. Furthermore," Eleanor paused, delivering the coup de grace, "we assert that these funds were accumulated not for marital investment, but specifically to prepare for this divorce filing, a hostile takeover planned years in advance while she claimed to be sacrificing her career." The room erupted in stunned murmurs. Adam gasped, covering his mouth. Schuyler's face was pure venom mixed with absolute terror. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. "Silence. The subpoena is admissible, counsel. The court needs to see those records." He turned to Brenda Hayes, his disappointment clear. "Counselor Hayes, failure to disclose significant marital income even if it was separate property in use, is a severe breach of discovery rules. I suggest you confer with your client." Eleanor, without uttering another word, had shown the court that Schuyler was not a victim seeking justice, but a meticulous predator who had hidden a massive financial cushion while simultaneously threatening her husband's livelihood. The foundation of Schuyler's entire victim narrative had just crumbled under the weight of Eleanor's technical precision. The tables have turned dramatically. The courtroom was absolutely silent, watching as Schuyler Reynolds was escorted back to the plaintiff's table. Her face was ashen, the realization of her meticulous planning being undone by the single devastating subpoena for financial records sinking in. Brenda Hayes, her high-powered attorney, looked defeated, her earlier arrogance shattered by the technical mastery of Eleanor Vance. Judge Stephen Harrison didn't waste time. The evidence Eleanor had presented, the separate property, account records for the home improvements, and the surprise evidence of Schuyler's undisclosed income, had fundamentally shifted the case. Judge Harrison looked directly at Eleanor, a flicker of professional respect passing between them. "Counselor Vance," the judge stated, "the court is satisfied with your defense regarding the separate property status of the primary residence at 345 Oak Street. Given the clear paper trail, this property, including its appreciation, is deemed the sole, separate property of Adam Vance." Adam gasped, his hand flying to his chest. The entire house, the foundation of his future, was safe. "Furthermore," Judge Harrison continued, his voice sharp and final, "Ms. Reynolds's deliberate failure to disclose substantial income during discovery is a severe violation of this court's mandated transparency. This evidence proves her claim of being a dependent spouse relying on marital assets to be completely and demonstrably false." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle on Schuyler. "The petition for forced liquidation of the residence is denied. All claims against Mr. Vance's retirement assets are hereby dismissed. Ms. Reynolds is ordered to pay all court costs and the attorney fees incurred by the defense." The gavel came down with a sharp, decisive crack. The final humiliation. Schuyler jumped up, rage finally overcoming her fear. "This is a joke. You can't do this. You just sided with him because you know this woman." She pointed a shaking finger at Eleanor. Judge Harrison slammed the gavel again. "Sit down, Ms. Reynolds. Your greed and attempts at legal coercion have been duly noted. Case closed." He nodded to the clerk. As the bailiff approached Schuyler, ready to maintain order, Judge Harrison looked directly at Eleanor, a triumphant glint in his eyes. He performed one final ceremonial duty, one only an old friend would know to do. He addressed the court clerk. "Clerk, please ensure that the defense's entry of appearance is correctly noted in the permanent record. For the benefit of all present, please read out Counselor Vance's full legal history upon entering the record." The clerk, a young woman who had watched the whole proceeding with growing awe, checked the digital file that Judge Harrison had quietly updated hours before. Her eyes widened as she read the data aloud. Eleanor Vance, entering appearance as counsel for defense. Prior registration, Eleanor Hayes, former associate counsel at Fletcher & Stone, specialized in high-asset commercial litigation. Admitted to the State Bar of New York in 1998, admitted to the North Carolina Bar Pro Hac Vice for this case. Highest recorded pro bono victory, $1.2 million settlement, a record which she achieved the year she voluntarily retired. The entire courtroom froze for the second time. The buzzing whispers died instantly. Brenda Hayes covered her mouth, realizing she had been comprehensively outmaneuvered and humiliated by a legal titan she thought was just a homemaker. Schuyler, reeling, finally understood the full, terrifying weight of the woman she had called a failure. The legacy restored. Eleanor rose slowly. She picked up her briefcase, not looking at anyone except her son. Adam was weeping silently, tears of shock and overwhelming relief streaming down his face. He looked at his mother, not as the quiet cook, but as the powerful professional who had sacrificed her entire career and then quietly reactivated it just to save him. "Mom," he whispered, his voice choked. You were, all this time." Eleanor squeezed his arm. "I never stopped being a lawyer, Adam. I simply chose the client who needed me most. You." They walked out of the courtroom, leaving Skylar and her shattered attorney staring at the clerk's transcription. The whispers in the hallway were no longer about Adam's failure, but about Eleanor Vance's silent, powerful legacy. She had defended her son, protected her home, and proven that the time she spent raising him was not a failure of judgment, but the foundation of the strength she needed to save him.